What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Hands and Feet, aka... Actually, I'm Michael, aka Hands and Feet, from HeHasAnswers.com. And this is the third installment that we're doing here in a long series to help people understand that the world we live in is not at all what we think it is. And the unfortunate reality is there are very powerful, influential people that they're not good-hearted people. They have very evil inclinations, and they have an agenda for the world, for you and I, and how they think the world should really go. And a lot of people find that hard to believe, but once people start looking at the evidence, it becomes very clear. So we've started by jumping right down the rabbit hole and looking at the reality that there are indeed pedophile networks where very powerful people are involved with having sex with underage children, women and boys. And we started off by looking at a few different cases. Of course, obviously Jeffrey Epstein. Many famous and powerful people flew to his island, often on his Lolita Express. That was the nickname for his plane because of the underage Lolitas that would fly on it. There was also the NXIVM sex cult, which was not posh, which was not just posh models and adult women. Oftentimes young girls were trafficked as well. And then we started off by looking at a very well researched evidential look at Belgium in the 90s. And so I just got to send a couple more shares here, and then we'll get going. And then we'll get started here. I just got to share to some more Facebook groups. Go ahead and share this, start some watch parties. Everybody needs to know this. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is reality. And we have to be willing to take a stand. And that's going to be namely through just being educated and being discerning and looking for the truth, and not believing every last thing that we're fed from mainstream media. We're going to be looking at mainstream media probably in one or two weeks, because they unfortunately are a part of the problem. It's a little known fact that, like all of the major media companies, you know how you think you have a selection of dozens and dozens of different places you can get your news, be it through, television news or paper or online magazine, etc., etc. They're all owned by like 6 major corporations that own all of the news groups. So they all just tell them how they want the news to come out. And there we go. We're all done. So let's move over and take a look at, tonight. So we're going to be looking at a doctor, so-called doctor, I guess a doctor in zoology and biology or something. But his science that he got into was definitely pseudoscience. He started looking at the sexuality of the human male and female. And you probably aren't familiar with him at all, but I'm going to show a trailer to a movie that came out in 2004. I can't believe it was that late. I was pretty sure it came out while I was still like a teenager or an adult, a young adult, and I was working at Rogers Video, because I remember bringing it home to watch, because I got to watch all the DVDs when they first came out. There we go.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alfred Kinsey from Indiana University, and I'm making a study of sex
This is Liam Neeson.
behavior.
So it's presented.
Common decision.
There's more than one?
I've learned that the gap between what we assume people do sexually and what they actually do is enormous.
How young were you when you first experienced hugging?
Necking.
Petting?
What did you dream about?
That's why a study of this kind is so important. All we have is what people like you are willing to share with us.
Does suppressing
2 or 3 times
No, only once.
a day. I think about my cat
lead to stuttering?
a lot.
So, if you're sitting comfortably there, let's begin. In an uninhibited society, a 12-year-old would know most of the biology, which I will have to give you in formal lectures.
Like, what's the benefit of that? A 12-year-old knowing all about everything.
Dr. Kinsey's findings are shocking.
Are you surprised at the success of your book?
No, it shows that the world has wanted this done.
And Dr. Kinsey. Here, here, here.
Hoover is still annoyed that you won't help him find homosexuals in the State Department.
It's advisable to stick to what's normal. You don't want to shake people up.
Of course not.
What did you expect?
The forces of chastity are massing once again.
Forces of chastity?
What are we to you, just lab rats? Is this just another part of the project?
Stop using science to justify what you've done.
Forgive me, Meg. I've taken on so many other people's secrets. I don't want any of my own.
Haven't I always been open to whatever you wanted?
Sex is a risky game because if you're not careful, it will cut you wide open.
You saved my life, sir.
Okay,
Told me
friends.
Your entire history, but there hasn't been a single mention of love.
Love is the answer, isn't it? But sex raises a lot of very interesting questions.
Wow. Okay, so I like movies, you know, I think we all like movies. Movies can be really enjoyable, but a lot of us watch movies not knowing that they're actually oftentimes tools of propaganda to shape the way we think about things. This movie was released to help fix a lot of what had been exposed about Kinsey's research and his findings and his team. And well, when I watched it when I was 19 or whatever, I thought, yeah, I mean, that was such a cool movie, man. We're so repressed, man. This is good. And I had no idea what I was talking about. And then I woke up almost 10 years ago now, and I've written a large part of a free ebook that it's in PDF form. I have no problem with people downloading it from my website, but I did a good deal of research into Alfred Kinsey and how he's influenced us this century. But I think I'll just let the next documentary speak for itself. And if you've been following along, which I hope you have been, you'll notice I haven't been using YouTube videos made by, you know, people down in their basement, you know, or in their garage, because unfortunately people look at that and immediately they think this is illegitimate. This has no bearing. This can't be true. This is just some weirdo conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearing cuckoo who's just put a bunch of disconnected points together in order to make up some sort of a theory. But that's not at all what's been going on. In fact, we looked at a couple people already who are, you know, who are very thorough in their investigations. But yeah, we've been using like real documentaries from British television shows so far. We used 60 Minutes from Australia's look at Jeffrey Epstein. Tonight we're going to look at another British documentary. And this guy named Adam Riva, he has a 13-minute intro to this video. And I recommend take note of this title here and watch it yourself. He does a good job introing this, but we're just going to keep it a little shorter by just jumping right in. Oh, I also want to say, someone did say to me recently after the last video that they had to stop watching because it was just so dark. And because, I mean, we were unveiling the reality that, like, Jeffrey Epstein had sourced out, like, thousands of girls over his lifetime, how the government had actually protected him so that he wouldn't have to go to jail for 40 years when he was first arrested for this behavior in 2008, and how he was put on 13 months. He was given 18 months of, like, I don't know what you call it, where you go to jail during the day. No, you're free to, like, go about your business in life during the day, and then you have to stay in your jail at night. But he actually had a private wing of the jail center, so he was able to do whatever he wanted there, and he probably lived a fairly luxurious life like that. Anyways, they said, you know, it's too dark. I had to turn it off, and I understand that. If you see all this and you believe it, and it's just you don't want to ingest any more of it because it's just so awful, by all means, you know, tune in next time. But if you find it dark and revolting and you don't believe it's real and you refuse to look at the evidence, you've got to buck up and you've got to look at it. This is the truth. We cannot just close our eyes to what's going on around us because it makes us feel uncomfortable. It's awful, you know. It may even stir up horrible memories for you, but that's fine. You know, you can tune out if as long as you believe this is going on, and tune in later on when we start to look at the agenda that's really going on in the world. But please don't ignore this. Don't ignore this. Our world, our society, our culture, everything is going in a horrible trajectory because of what's going on, because of basically the puppet masters above everything.
In 1948, a book was published that sparked the sexual revolution. Unnoticed within it were the details of the sexual abuse of several hundred children.
It's a fact.
Who were these children? Who were their abusers? And how did the world's most famous sex scientist come to use the details of these sexual assaults as evidence of children's sexuality?
So here, this is the person that Liam Neeson portrayed, Alfred Kinsey.
Professor Alfred Kinsey was the father of the sexual revolution. From 1948 to 1956, he traveled the world, advising governments how to modernize antiquated sex laws. From Britain, where he advised the Wolfenden Committee on Homosexuality, to Europe and America, his advice was key to updating sexual attitudes. In 1948, Kinsey published the first scientific study of what people do in bed. Sexual behavior in the human male took the world by storm.
When the book came out, it simply hit America. It was compared to the atom bomb. People were rushing out to buy it. It sold something like 300,000 copies for a book almost twice as expensive as the ordinary book, and certainly 5 times as fat. All the papers had it, either in the front pages or very, very big in the middle pages. All the magazines, Life, Time, had 6 or 7 page spreads about it.
Before Kinsey, America had a schizophrenic attitude to sex. No matter what they did in private, in public, its citizens adhered to a strict moral code.
The only sex that is sanctioned by society and its legal strictures in the 20s and 30s is sex between people who are married.
Trevor, how's it going, man? Welcome to the show.
There's some interesting, and arcane laws about even husbands and wives. One of my favorites from Northwood, Arkansas, that a man and woman, even if they're married, mustn't laugh while they're having sex, because that's sex is serious business.
Oh, the sexual climate in those days was, well, to put it gently, repressive.
This guy's name is Paul Gebhard, just in case you can't see that. He's a former, what does that say? Colleague of Kinsey. So he's one of the guys that helped Kinsey back in the day doing his research. You'll see pictures of him when he was younger. And sure, I mean, there were laws that were silly, like not laughing during sex. That's between a man and a woman, Obviously it's hurtful if you're laughing for the wrong reasons, but if you're laughing because, something comical happens, that's okay, Sex between a husband and a wife can be, really fun, obviously, and enjoyable in that way. And it's okay to laugh. But that's not what these people were really concerned about, as you're going to see.
Everything was illegal except wet dreams.
Thanks, Trevor. I do my best.
Premarital intercourse, that was labeled fornication. If you had extramarital intercourse, that was adultery. course, homosexuality was taboo completely. So was animal contact. If you tried petting, you had to be very careful of the age of your partner, or you would be contributing to the delinquency of a minor. You also had to watch your techniques. If there was any mouth-genital contact, by definition, that was sodomy. Literally, as Kinsey once said, if all the sex laws were rigidly enforced, about 90% of the males would be felons.
Not true.
Kinsey's book challenged most known views on sexual behavior. From masturbation to adultery, homosexuality to bestiality, Kinsey's patient research appeared to reveal the reality of America's sex life.
We took sex, you might say, out of the closet. We made it possible to discuss sexual matters in the home, in the office, in schools, and even in the media. We sort of broke the taboos.
The research was based on the biggest survey of sexual attitudes and behavior ever undertaken. Kinsey invented a highly detailed, confidential questionnaire. His researchers had to learn the complicated code which encrypted both questions and answers. Paul Gebhard was a senior member of the team.
There's Paul.
Frankly, it was a damnable thing to memorize.
Gebhard.
And Kinsey forced us to memorize it. He wouldn't let us keep a little guide or cheat sheet or something. We had to memorize it verbally. It was a sheet of paper divided up into columns and lines. And each column dealt with one subject. For example, one column dealt with the frequency of intercourse in marriage. Another column dealt with masturbation. Another column dealt with psychological responses to sexual stimuli, etc.
Another thing.
Why do you think they were so secretive about this survey if what they were looking into was so benign? It's because a lot of the things they were asking about are heinous. And if they would have been caught with these things, their research probably would have been put to an end for good reason.
He did was always to assume that people had done everything. It was never, have you had sex with a pig? It was, when was the first time you had sex with a pig? And as one of his interviewees said, if you hadn't had sex with a pig, you were fine, but if you had, he'd got you.
That gentleman there, Gaither Hardy, was a biographer of Kinsey, but he had also kind of snuck his way into Kinsey's team as a bystander and an observer. And as he gained more and more trust, he started actually digging into their hidden files and whatnot. So
he was in the market for everything. His interview system was so flexible that if you happened to surprise him with something, turned out that you were a hair fetishist or something like that, he would stop and go off on that tangent and explore it to the nth degree.
But there was a dark side to the research. One chapter in the book dealt with the previously unresearched subject of child sexuality. It's little known that to get this information, Kinsey cultivated relationships with habitual child molesters.
Fact.
These pedophiles would provide him with accounts of their abuse of children and with their own interpretations of children's sexual development.
At the beginning of his research, Kinsey saw pedophilia as really beyond the pale. As he collected more and more data, and as he, again, hoped to promote more and more tolerance, he has a hard time maintaining moral boundaries.
Yeah, right. His desire was to destroy morality. But you'll see. You'll see.
In June 1944, Alfred Kinsey left Indiana on an 1,800-mile trek across the southwestern United States.
Agreed, Trevor. Agreed. That's why we're doing this series.
He was going to a clandestine meeting with a man who was to become his prime source of information about child sexuality.
I hope people can see.
This individual was, I suppose you might say, his interest in sex was his main hobby in life. Anything was a sexual object for him.
Notice Paul Gebhard laugh.
In having sex with men, women, and children and animals.
Not funny.
He just was curious to see what would happen.
Oh, I wonder. Not funny. How can this guy make such light of it? Well, because he's wicked.
His first sexual contact was overt intercourse with his grandmother. He had looked up his family tree. There were 30, I forget how many, 33 or 38 members. He had had almost all of them. He had had intercourse with hundreds upon hundreds of males and females of every conceivable age. My memory is that it's exceeded 600 for both boys and girls, and we haven't yet got to maturity.
Molestation he's talking about. That's Clarence Tripp, also very much
The man was a U.S. government
permissive
land examiner called Rex King. To protect him, Kinsey gave him the code name Mr. Green. His job took him across Arizona and New Mexico, trips he used to prey on children. He molested at least 800 boys and girls, recording the details in explicit handwritten diaries. Kinsey was told about Green by his own mentor in sex research, Dr. Robert Dickinson. Dickinson had collaborated with the pedophile for several years and taught him how to record his child abuse in scientific detail.
Scientific. He taught him how to measure things and time things, and encouraged him to. He knew he was going to do his ordinary behavior anyway. Dickinson couldn't have stopped him from being a pedophile, but he said, at least you ought to, do something scientific about it, so it won't be just your jollies. It'll be something worthwhile to science. So he gave him some training by letter and correspondence.
He's not chuckling because he's uncomfortable.
Experimented with baby. Penis 1.7 inches by 3 inches. Stiff immediately. Throbs in 3.5 minutes.
Green's diaries were a highly incriminating record of 20 years of sexual abuse. But Kinsey was tantalized by the prospect of so much unique data.
I congratulate you on the research spirit which has led you to collect data over these many years. Everything that you've accumulated must find its way into scientific channels.
I gotta say, I worshipped data. Anyone who could contribute to his aggregate data had a very high place in his, pantheon of heroes. And when Kinsey learned about this material, he saw it as a gold mine, as a scientific gold mine that would provide information in an area about which science knew very, very little.
I just want to say for the record, I hate watching this stuff. And I don't like having to watch it again. When new information comes out, I like to watch it to know about it. But yeah, this isn't fun. It's so evil.
Kinsey met Green at a secret location in Arizona. Because of the illegal nature of their contents, Green had buried many of his diaries in the desert.
As you do.
Kinsey persuaded him to retrieve them and pass them on to him.
Yeah, exactly, Trevor.
Green
Being normalized.
had been a predatory child molester for more than 20 years. So why did Kinsey agree to work with him? Clarence Tripp was one of Kinsey's closest associates. Even today, he defends Kinsey's involvement with the pedophile.
Yeah.
Green was actually extremely conservative in all kinds of ways, and we know that for sure because he had, you can get into trouble in a flash if you have any kind of even tickling, any kind of sexual contact whatsoever with the child, because all you need is one whimper out of the child. You don't even need a formal charge to put you in the jailhouse. Well, here's this man with hundreds of contacts. There was never a charge against him. He was never arrested for anything. All the children thought he was wonderful. All the mothers thought he was wonderful. There are two, I suppose, lest you get contradicted, there are two instances in which a young boy or girl, I guess it was, I don't remember, didn't complain. They agreed to the sexual contact, but then they found it very painful and yelled out when it actually took place. This was because they were very young and had small genitalia, and Green was a grown man with enormous genitalia, and there was a fit problem.
Look how he talks about it. He has no problem talking about it. It's sickening. This is a guy from the Kinsey.
For the next 3 years, Kinsey corresponded regularly with Green.
From the Kinsey Institute.
He would publish large sections of Green's diaries in his first revolutionary book on human sexuality. But rather than presenting them as the claims of a self-confessed child abuser, Kinsey put them forward as the first ever scientific proof that children were sexual beings from birth.
Oh, it's awful.
When, in 1948, Alfred Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Male became an instant bestseller, no one seemed to notice the contents of Chapter 5.
They didn't want to. They wanted to enjoy the rest of the book.
In it, Kinsey reproduced sections of the pedophile diaries he had received from Mr. Green. First, and with no independent corroboration, he published verbatim Green's detailed descriptions of what the pedophile claimed were orgasms experienced by the hundreds of children he had abused.
Extreme tension with violent convulsion, often involving the sudden heaving and jerking of the whole body, groaning, sobbing, or more violent cries, sometimes with an abundance of tears, especially among younger children.
Yeah,
if you read those words, what he's talking about is kids who are screaming, kids who are protesting in every way they can the fact that their bodies, that their persons are being violated. The individual in question, I think, harmed in serious ways a large number of young people.
Green had also carried out what he claimed were scientific experiments to determine the age at which boys were first capable of orgasms. For the experiment, he masturbated 317 infants and children from 2 months to 15 years old,
2
recording
months.
which ones achieved what he interpreted as orgasms. Kinsey reproduced this as Table 31.
So obviously not based on the release of semen, but just on convulsions and jerking and whatnot. Like, just evil.
In Table 32, he laid out the time it had taken Green to bring each of these children to these so-called orgasms. Green also claimed that his experiments proved that, given sufficient adult stimulation, some of the boys were capable of multiple orgasms. Again, with no way of checking the claims, Kinsey simply reproduced them as scientific fact.
He didn't
Finally,
care.
In Table 34, Kinsey set out Green's notes on the time it had taken him to masturbate the children to multiple orgasms.
Trevor says, I wonder if people even know how much Hollywood is drenched in garbage. We're gonna get to that, Trevor. Wow, we can't do it all at once, but I mean, we did look at Epstein last week, and a lot of Hollywood people were there. We all know about Kevin Spacey having sex with 14 and 15-year-old boys. Those are the ones that have come forward. I wouldn't doubt at all if there were some that were younger, but where this documentary says, you know, Kinsey's putting out this information without corroborating the evidence. No, he didn't care. He wanted this out there to shape the minds of the masses in terms of our thinking and attitude towards sex.
The average interval between the first and second climaxes ranged from less than 10 seconds to 30 minutes or more. Even the youngest males, as young as 5 months in age, are capable of such repeated reactions.
Oh, gosh. Like, what parent would let this guy
The
do
table
this?
suggested that some children, including a 4-year-old boy, had been masturbated over a 24-hour period.
That means he wasn't allowed to sleep.
In his book, and based primarily on Green's information, Kinsey claimed that children could, with the assistance of an experienced adult, enjoy sexual activity from the moment they were born.
His words, friends, Kinsey's words, people...
It was a revolutionary claim that overturned all previous scientific knowledge about the development of child sexuality. But the claim and the experiments that lay behind it have alarmed Kinsey's critics, particularly those who campaign for a return to traditional values.
We have a whole chapter here in which children have been tortured for this so-called scientific data. And this is the calculations of those abuse data into tables to promote this as scientific to the world. An assessment of these data suggests that at minimum 317, at maximum 1,200 and some boys were being sexually raped around the clock using stopwatches.
Because of its illegal origins, Green's material was a closely guarded secret. Only a trusted inner circle knew of its existence.
It was illegal, and we knew it was illegal, but it's very important for people to study childhood sexuality.
Oh, yeah.
In other cultures, anthropologists can sometimes do this, but in our culture, it was because of our insistence that children are non-sexual, studying childhood sexuality was essentially impossible, except, for this case like Green. And so he contributed a fair amount to our knowledge of, and when I say our knowledge, I mean medicine's knowledge of sexuality in children.
But some of Kinsey's team questioned both the morality and the scientific validity of using the material.
Well, when I saw the table on time to orgasm when infants...
This is Vincent Knowles, also a former colleague of Kinsey. He probably left the team at some point. You'll see why.
Are stimulated, carried out to the fraction of a second. I thought it was an absurd page in science. But to actually stand there with a stopwatch and have somebody or oneself stimulate the infant and time it to the split second was simply so gross that I didn't feel it had a place in a scientific book.
Remember that Knowles, who I've never met, was he's a very upstanding kind of man. He was damaged in childhood with all this morality. And then he had this...
damaged with morality because he could not go along with the timing of victimization of children. This is a depraved individual, friends. Don't be deceived by his calm and genteel demeanor. He is evil to the core. He might not go around cutting people's throats. He'd probably diddle your kids if that was his affinity.
A peculiar moralistic wife, I'm understating it. And through all this, it sounded to him like pure sin.
Whether or not I had a moral objection to it, and I did, but that was not the point. It was that this was a scientific book. He was proud of its being scientific. And here was some completely unevaluated, potentially important stuff carried out to absurd numbers, fractions of a second. It was irrelevant. It was unworthy of him as a scientist.
50 years after Kinsey first published Green's pedophile diaries as scientific fact, the Kinsey Institute has been forced to defend his involvement with pedophiles. Director John Bancroft accepts that the scientific reliability of Green's diaries was dubious, but believes Kinsey was justified to make use of them.
This is the new director.
Kinsey made it clear in his writings that he saw his task as finding out as much information about sexual behavior as he could. and he sought information from wherever he could find it. He also made it very clear that he did not see it as his role as a scientist to make moral judgments.
I think that Alfred Kinsey used this individual's data and shaped a chapter drawing upon it, really disgraced his discussion and elevated to the realm of scientific information, what should have been dismissed as unreliable, self-serving data provided by a predatory pedophile.
How did Alfred Kinsey, a respected scientist and devoted father, become so involved with a man like Green? The answer may lie in a personal war he was fighting, a war against all moral and legal restrictions on sex.
Exactly.
A war that had its roots in his own childhood in the slums of Hoboken, New York.
His parents were very poor, and Kinsey's life was dominated to begin with by poverty, very religious, repressive, not just sexually in every way, drink, smoking, Methodist religious background. The family was almost friendless. They were so religious. There are examples of him praying to be allowed to stop masturbating. He remained religious until into his 20s. He then lost his religion, and he turned with fury on religion. He thought it was hypocritical. The repression, the frustration, sexual frustration he'd experienced as a result of his father's strictures, that anger remained with him all his life.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Kinsey's close colleagues believed that this anger fueled his research. To carry out the research, Kinsey believed his key staff needed personal experience of a wide variety of sexual behavior. To ensure this, he encouraged them to have sex with each other.
In the staff.
One night, Kinsey said, "Why don't you come down to my room?" So I went down, and I immediately felt some tension in the air, which was quite different from anything I had experienced with him before. And it suddenly occurred to me that Kinsey was preparing to offer me the opportunity to have some homosexual experience. And I said, "I don't think I want to participate in this, and please excuse me," and I walked out the door.
No means no, Kinsey.
But Kinsey's interest was not solely scientific. He had discovered that he was increasingly sexually attracted to men and had begun to live a double life. In public, he appeared to be a happily married, respectable academic. In private, he sought out homosexual encounters. But these were illegal, and he was forced to keep them secret.
On the one hand, he had a wife, he had children, he had a career as a respected college professor. On the other hand, he had sexual needs and desires that could not be met within the confines of middle-class morality. That made him, of necessity, cultivate two kind of parallel existences. The one the world saw, the one that was private, sovereign, and known only to himself. So when he builds a staff in which there is some wife swapping, when he builds a staff in which there are some gay contacts, he's doing it, I think, out of needs that are both professional and private.
To satisfy these twin motives, Kinsey secretly commissioned a series of explicit sex films involving his staff and outside volunteers. Clarence Tripp was his first photographer and became one of his closest confidants.
I was a photographer from 20th Century Fox, and he said, "Oh, among other things, do make me some movies. I need 2,000 orgasms." Of course, we never got to 2,000, but we got to hundreds.
The types of behavior filmed kind of run the gamut. There was a lot of just heterosexual copulation. There was masturbation. There was also more than a little masochism filmed at the Institute. Kinsey, I think, wanted to use these films to to study and to learn and to observe. That motivation was certainly there. I think also Kinsey has a personal interest in seeing the filming take place.
Yeah,
For him,
no
it's
kidding.
both satisfying emotionally, and it's also important scientifically that the filming take place.
But Kinsey had begun to realize this type of sex research would take a heavy toll on both him and his staff.
When Kinsey first hired me to do pictures, he said, I want to warn you of something. As soon as we get you to photographing sex every day and paying attention to sex right, left, and center, pretty soon nothing will turn you on. Nothing in the area, nothing visual will turn you on, because you'll lose all those sensitivities.
As he immersed himself ever deeper in human sexuality, the effects on Kinsey were becoming difficult to hide. Torn between the demands of his public image and his private sexual needs, his behavior became increasingly self-destructive.
A strong association developed in him that in order to have sexual pleasure, he also had to pay for it in pain. Kinsey, on one occasion, circumcised himself with a pocket knife without anesthesia or anything else. That, to me, is an act of a desperate man. It's an act of a person whose private boundaries are starting to erode.
Very tragic. Like, as evil as his agenda was, it's still very sad. He's a human being. A deceived, deluded human being.
In 1947, Kinsey sent the final proofs of his chapter on child sexuality for approval by the pedophile he codenamed Mr. Green. Much of it came from Green's child abuse diaries, which has called into question its value.
The fact that it's only one person in itself weakens its scientific value, but doesn't remove it. We've known of a few people of this kind who have kept detailed recordings of their sexual exploits over a long period of time. To some extent, they may feel that they're justifying their sexual behavior in the process of documenting it. And I think one has to be rather cautious about accepting their information just at face value.
But
Kinsey's critics say that whether or not the material was scientific, he should have reported Green to the police.
Yes.
But the Kinsey Institute rejects this.
Listen to Bancroft.
It's inconceivable that one could do research in that way, give people guarantees of confidentiality, and then when they've given you the information, say, well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to report you to the police. That would be immorality in my book of the highest order.
His definition of immorality to the highest order is giving someone your word in order to get their data on all their molestation and not turning them into to the police. I think immorality to the highest order is actually victimizing 800 to 1,200 children, like Green did. I mean, come on. That's some skewed ethics there, friends. Under
Some
1,000
of Kinsey's other
points.
defenders claim that Green had
Thanks, Curious Rose.
long ceased to be an active child abuser by the time he met Kinsey, and so there was no need to report him to the police. But the Kinsey Institute refuses to release Green's diaries, which could corroborate this. Only trusted Kinsey supporters are allowed access to them.
By convincing them that I was not against Kinsey, but concerned to find out what he was really like, and as they got used to me and realized that I was honest and sincere, I did finally get into, I think, everything I could reasonably have expected.
But Jonathan Gaythorne Hardy's notes, taken during his access to Green's diaries, suggest that the pedophile was sexually active until 1954, more than 10 years after he first met Kinsey.
Don't reveal that he went on gathering histories until 1954.
What does the highlighted piece mean?
Yes. Well, you see, he may have done, but the thing is, Kinsey didn't use that information. It's quite possible that Green went on, in fact, I'm sure he did, went on having sex with everybody until then.
Totally, Rose.
But that was long after Kinsey had got the journals.
But you'll see this isn't just about these unfortunate kids in the past. It's about children today, as well as our world, our culture as a whole, and the agenda that we're being brought down.
Kinsey's critics believe his involvement with Green was morally indefensible, especially because the pedophile was probably still sexually abusing children.
The only justification for defending Kinsey was that all this happened before. If Green was sexually abusing children to 1954, Kinsey's last book came out in 1953. That certainly would mean that all of that violence and all of that abuse was going on throughout the entire time Kinsey was collecting these data. Wouldn't it?
Green was not the only pedophile providing information to Kinsey.
Oh, well then.
We got them in prisons, a lot of them, because we had the prison records of these people. So we'd say, give us a list of everybody in San Quentin who's sent up on pedophilia charge, and we'd go after them. So we got a lot that way. Then there was also a pedophile organization in this country. They cooperated with us, and some of them who were not, of course, not incarcerated, they came and gave us information.
Wow!
Not all of the pedophile information arriving at the Kinsey Institute in Indiana came from within America.
There was a man in Germany who was a pedophile, and he wrote Kinsey. And he was interested in information about pedophilia, and he offered his own case history. Of course, Kinsey couldn't go to Germany to get it, but he wrote him questions in a letter, and they carried on quite a correspondence. And we were learning some interesting things about pedophilia in Germany, you might say.
Chuckle, chuckle.
The pedophile was Dr. Fritz von Balusek, a former senior Nazi Party official. Before the war, he had been a stormtrooper. During the war, he had commanded a ghetto in an occupied Polish town. During all this time, and in the years that followed, he sexually abused hundreds of pre-adolescent girls and boys. He recorded the details in pseudo-scientific diaries in which he claimed to have masturbated and penetrated the children to assist their sexual development.
Oh, it's evil.
At Kinsey's request, von Balusek sent his diaries to Indiana. But then one of his victims was murdered.
So the police were looking for pedophiles, and they ran across him and decided he was probably the murderer. And so as they went through his possessions, they found his correspondence with Kinsey. So they said, aha, Kinsey must know all about this man. We've got to have Kinsey's testimony and whatever records this man sent to Kinsey. So they got Interpol, International Police, on the thing. And they even involved the FBI and some other things. And they put an enormous amount of pressure on Kinsey to reveal this guy's, this stuff he sent. And he was also keeping a sexual diary, and they wanted his diary badly. And so Kinsey said, absolutely not. This is completely confidential, and you're not going to get it. We'll destroy it before we let you have it.
Oh, it's funny.
Von Balusek was never charged with murder, but he pleaded guilty to sexually abusing more than 30 children. At his trial, the judge criticized Kinsey for failing to report such an active pedophile to the police. It is a criticism the Kinsey Institute rejects.
Yep. Evil.
I think people have got to ask themselves the question, do they believe that research into sexuality should be done or should not be done? Particularly research into sexuality which might be, in some sense, illegal.
Listen to this.
The cost, potentially, is more children at risk of abuse. Can that cost be justified?
Consider the cost of remaining in ignorance. Unless we know about these behaviours, we'll be in a much worse position than if we have more information about them. That was Kinsey's view.
Oh, listen to him. He puts it out there and then gives himself the escape clause of, that was Kinsey's view, as if the director of the Kinsey Institute does not share the view. Regardless of even if it was just Kinsey's view, think about that for a second. How pressing and important is it to know about the sexuality of small children? So important, we've got to let pedophilia run rampant and not turn despicable criminals in. Why did they want this data so badly?
John Bancroft is adamant that Kinsey never did more than accept reports from pedophiles on their sexual activity.
Some sense,
Kinsey
Trevor
didn't
writes.
ask anybody to carry out any particular form of sexual behavior. He simply asked them to let him know of their experiences that they'd had.
But at von Balusek's trial, an exchange between the judge and the pedophile seemed to suggest otherwise. The judge said,
I had the impression that you got to the children in order to impress Kinsey and to deliver him material.
And von Balusek replied,
Kinsey himself asked me for that.
If the judge's impression was correct, and if von Balusek was telling the truth, it would be evidence of Kinsey's involvement in ongoing child sexual abuse.
Now, just thinking critically and objectively here, it's possible von Balusek, the SS Nazi guy, said that in order to try and make himself look less guilty in hopes of a lesser sentencing, trying to shift blame to Kinsey even though that never happened. But I think, friends, we can all agree the most likely scenario is that indeed Kinsey was encouraging him to continue this behavior in order to get the data.
It tells me that von Balusek, who was not a sex researcher, got his directions as to how to do the, quote, scientific part of the research from Dr. Kinsey, that he was directed.
Over the years, people have used their contacts with Kinsey in a variety of ways, and it's not surprising that if someone's being charged with an offence, if they can bring Kinsey's name in, they will do, in the hope that it might mitigate their case. But Kinsey was not responsible for what that man was doing, nor did he encourage it.
The key to resolving Kinsey's involvement with child sexual abuse is in von Balusek's diaries.
Exactly.
But the Kinsey Institute refuses to release them.
If he's innocent, why not
However,
show them the,
for more
the
than 15
evidence?
years, Kinsey appealed to people of all sexual orientations to send him information. In at least some of these appeals, he seemed prepared to give instructions on how to record their sexual activity.
Yeah, here comes more evidence. He was
Persons
definitely...
who have kept calendars or who are willing to begin keeping day-by-day calendars showing the source and frequency of their sexual outlet are urged to write to us for instructions.
So many people responded that the Kinsey Institute has never been able to catalogue their material, and today has no idea who sent in which diaries. But the Institute says it has long been expecting to hear from someone claiming to be a victim of Kinsey's pedophile correspondence.
Oh, this part's sad. Even sadder. Believe that.
Esther White is the first person publicly to make this claim. Esther's family had a long-standing connection with Kinsey. Her grandfather attended Indiana University with him. But Esther came from an incestuous family. She claims she was abused first by her grandfather and later by her father.
The abuse started with my father, I think, as a very young child. Probably about age 7. My father started a loving, concerned, petting kind of an affection.
Like Joe Biden.
And when the opportunity came along, he took the opportunity to turn that from affection into what he called affection and love, into a sexual relationship, intercourse, oral copulation, ugly things that I don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
Based on what her father told her, Esther believes he was one of the pedophiles who provided information to Kinsey.
My father actually did mail in some questionnaires, I believe, to the Kinsey Institute about the sexual abuse that he was doing on me. at the very peak of when all the abuse was going on. There was a paper in a brown envelope, and it was kind of halfway out of the envelope. It was a summer afternoon, and I don't know why I remember there was a warm breeze blowing through the bedroom window. The envelope had blown a little bit, and I went to put it back on the dresser, and I saw that there were questions there. And it was a whole series of questions with little boxes in front of them. And I read one of the sentences, and I didn't know one of the words. And so I asked my father, what is O-R-G-A-Z? Oh, he says, that's orgasm. And he continued to explain to me what an orgasm was. And then I realized why he was looking at his watch. Because he was telling me to let him know when I felt an orgasm. And
for Kinsey.
He saw that I had seen this paper, he immediately said he had a deadline to meet and he had to send it away. So he put it in this envelope.
Everton, sorry,
I know
links
nothing
don't
about
work.
this woman or her father or grandfather. I have no idea whether there's any basis of fact in what she's saying at all.
Would it be possible for the Institute to examine its files and determine whether her father did send information to Kinsey?
Oh God, indeed.
At this point, I can't say. We have a huge amount of information that people have sent to the Institute about their sexual experiences. Somewhere amongst that, there may be something relevant to this woman. But that material is uncatalogued, unordered, and I really have no idea how difficult it will be to check that out.
Like, I know a lot of people don't like Trump, but under his administration, they have caught, I think, 3 times as many pedophiles as under all of Obama's years. And I would just love to find out about like the FBI or something going into the Kinsey Institute in the cover of night, you know, clandestine operation, going in, breaching their security systems, and locking everything down with a warrant and saying, I'm sorry, it's time to look at all of this stuff, because it is just criminal for them to keep it all hidden. And it's also just evil to think that if they were served a warrant and told you have this many days, they would just go and erase everything they've put onto computers, burn everything that was left on paper.
Can you understand, though, why she would feel disturbed by the knowledge that that material may be residing here in the Institute?
If the description is accurate, then I can see she could have some concern, yes. But she can also rest assured that the material will be treated with great confidentiality. And we will never reveal the identity of anybody involved to anyone else.
Soulless.
But from what her father said about Kinsey, Esther fears the details of her abuse may have been used in his second book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. In a section dealing with sex between adults and children, Kinsey claimed to have evidence that children can enjoy abuse.
Did you hear that?
The adult contacts are a source of pleasure to some children, and sometimes may arouse the child erotically and bring it to orgasm. It is difficult to understand why a child, except for its cultural conditioning, should be disturbed at having its genitalia touched.
What? He wrote that. He wrote that.
But for Esther, some memories are so painful they stand out even 50 years later.
My school was going to have a little operetta. When I got on stage, I was so scared because I knew what was going to happen on the way home. My father put me in the back seat and, of course, continued to sexually abuse me. But I looked out the back window and there was a gorgeous, beautiful moon and stars. And it's very difficult to say it. I'm sorry. It was a very painful memory to remember. But I was crying so hard that the tears were running into my eye, out of my eyes and down into my ears. And I was crying and my sinuses were so filled up I couldn't breathe. And my ears were filling up with water. And I just had a fear, I'm gonna die.
Surely.
Me
the
too,
way to
Rose.
get
It's awful.
Information on children's sexuality is not by asking men who have a vested interest in saying children are sexual and they enjoy being sexual.
Yeah.
Nobody has said that the best way of getting information about childhood sexuality is by talking to paedophiles. Kinsey didn't say that. He simply reported some information of that kind because he thought it was worthy of consideration.
Based on Kinsey's writings, he approved fully and wholly of adult-child sexual interactions, what he called
exactly.
play or interactions. Not only that, he recommended
Yeah.
that adults could effectively aid children in better sexual lives by giving them quote-unquote orgasms at a very early age.
Without help from more experienced persons, many pre-adolescents take a good many years to discover masturbatory techniques that are sexually effective.
What a shame.
It is probable that half or more of the boys in an uninhibited society could reach climax by the time they were 3 or 4 years of age.
Ugh. So friends, while I did research for my free ebook that anyone could go download, because I don't want money for it, I want people to know this stuff, I went and I looked up these types of quotes in Kinsey's Sexual Behavior of the Modern Male, I think it was called, his first big book. I went and looked up his actual quotes from online PDFs of his book. Like, you can go and look this stuff up. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's not made up. He wrote this stuff. Like, what a sick, sick person. And as you're going to see as we move on, his quote-unquote research, his deviancy has influenced everything we know about sex today.
In his final years, Kinsey would testify before legislatures and courts that pedophilia was a less dangerous problem than public intolerance of it.
Kinsey said some of the most brilliant things imaginable about that.
Oh, brilliant.
Pedophilia is an almost non-existent kind of crime, and the thing that he hated most about it is that people use words like child molestation. What is that? Nobody knows.
Look at him laugh.
Abuse of children? Are they talking about bollocks them against the ear or hitting them
No,
with a
emotional
stovepipe?
abuse.
Are they talking about tickling them a little? Are you talking about fondling? You're going to put fondling and death attacks in the same group? As Kinsey said, by this kind of paranoia, you do the child more damage for life than all the pedophiles in the world would do.
Like, if this is not the most damning information to you, friend, I don't know what to say. If you don't hear this and go, whoa, wow, stop the bus, what is going on? Then I don't think you'll ever understand. But please, please, I beg you, just assess and analyze what you're hearing and think of where that's led us and where, of course, the trajectory continues to go.
pedophiles are very sad people. I think the fact that they're even taking the information from a pedophile perpetuates the abuse. It glorifies it to that pedophile.
No doubt. Someone
Esther
tells you
White
to...
wants an independent inquiry into Kinsey's involvement with pedophiles, and an investigation of the child abuse diaries still locked inside the Institute.
Those archives need to be opened up so people can understand that if they feel they were connected with the Kinsey Institute, that they can go back and know for sure.
But Kinsey's surviving colleagues say their original promises of confidentiality.
Brenda says maps are a huge threat, not sad. I'm not sure what you mean, Brenda.
Make this impossible.
You'd have to tell us what an MAP is and why that's not a threat. Or, sorry, why that's a huge threat and why it's not sad.
We were asking people to put their careers and their marriages on the line by talking to us.
Well, what brave souls.
To place that much trust in us, we had to be absolutely trustworthy. We were willing to go to jail if need be.
I hope they
destroy
do.
the records if need be. We've thought about that on several occasions.
What, destroying the records?
Yeah. Because I even thought about it recently when some of the politicians started getting interested in the Institute. And there was a senator from Texas that wanted a congressional investigation of the Institute and its records. Then there was a local senator in Indiana, Burton. He wanted the Institute investigated. You know, they all said, oh, you probably have, case histories of sex criminals, and we'd like to get those records so we could catch these people, that sort of. And when they start talking like that, then we seriously think, what would happen if we started facing court orders, or if search people came in with a warrant to seize what we had. Yeah, so we've made precautions.
Exactly.
What sort of precautions?
All we have to do is destroy the code and some card files, and that does it. Then the case histories are absolutely unreadable.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the decoding abilities of different geniuses and whatnot, I'm sure that wouldn't be a big problem. Brenda says minor attracted persons are a threat to all children, not a sad reality. Yes, they definitely are a threat to all children, and they're a threat to civilization itself, because it's really unhealthy for a person to be victimized as a child, and that generally does not serve them well going through life. It often leads to a lot of difficulty and a lot of other bad choices going forward. So the more people like that you have, the more society suffers altogether, because just people aren't healthy. And so more bad choices are being made. And this is not just about pedophilia. It's about all kinds of things. But I do disagree. I think it's very sad that these people become pedophiles because it's so awful. And a lot of them, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's because they were victimized themselves as children, and they grow up and they try and cope with it by excusing it, normalizing it, and deciding it's okay, and then doing it themselves. And I wish these people could accept the truth that changes them forever, but most of them don't.
The Kinsey Institute says it will not destroy its records. It is republishing both of Kinsey's original volumes, including all the material provided by pedophiles.
They're going to be republished. I would like to stop that. I don't know how to do it, but I would like to do that. They used me, and they used those children. And that's a terrible way to feel that you've been used. for a lie?
All right, I think that's the end of that one. So just so everybody knows, you're welcome to throw some comments in there. I'm not sure on Facebook, unless you're watching, I think, my original post, I won't see your comments in some of the groups I've shared to. So you can follow the link back to my own personal Facebook profile. But yeah, I mean, feel free to converse about that. I got more links to look at. I think one thing I just want to say, friends, like from that lady saying, I would like to stop, this or whatever. It's here's the theory I'm going to throw out there. I don't have time to look into it, and I don't really care that much too. Maybe someone else already has, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if something was happening, and people were starting to put pressure on the Kinsey Institute to release this information, and public opinion was starting to ask questions, and then someone said, hey, we got to make a movie real quick. Get someone sexy in there, someone likable. Liam Neeson. Okay, great. Now give him an all-star cast. Give him a great leading lady. Awesome. Good. Let's get out a movie that makes people just think that there was nothing going on. Like, do you remember in the trailer how in the interviews, they were talking to very normal seeming like American people who just, yeah, this is what I like to do, and da-da-da-da-da. Oh, I didn't know there was more than one position. The reality, and this documentary didn't talk about it very much, but most of their surveys were performed in state penitentiaries. Okay? So you go around and you collect most of your data by getting into prisons and being permitted to do all these questionnaires with thousands and thousands of inmates in order to get your data. Do you, for a moment, think that this would be a good way to find a representation of the average American citizen and what they do sexually? People in prison generally make horrible choices their whole entire lives and have no thought of consequence. So what do you think that might do to the way they behave sexually? They're not going to be your average person. So all of his findings were horribly skewed. In fact, I hate to say it, I'm gonna burst some bubbles here. I might upset some people, but you got to know the truth. I remember growing up in the 90s, and everyone was telling everybody, and it was a buzz, 10% of men are homosexual. That came from Kinsey's research. That came from his surveys and questionnaires being performed in prisons, where a lot of men had decided, hey, look, I'm in prison for 25 years. I've got to get off. I'm going to have sex with another man. Okay? So that's why there was so many people. And now you can go look it up. The new research has found it's probably actually about 1% or 1.67% of males are actually homosexual. So what kind of an impact do you think that had on people's thinking, on teenage guys like myself growing up in the 90s hearing 10% of guys are gay? And you look around and you look at your 10 friends and you think, gee whiz, which one of us has a propensity to homosexuality, right? When really you look around at 100 people. Oh boy. Okay, so here's another documentary you might want to look at. This is called The Children of Table 34. So as you saw in that last documentary, it was tables 31 through 34 or 35 that talked all about the pedophilia. I've looked at these tables, and anyone can find them. Let's see. Let's just go look at one right now. Kinsey table 31 PDF. All right, here we go. Images. So which one's table 34? Let's see if we can go look. Age, 5 months. Number of orgasms, 3. Time involved? I don't know. I didn't time it that time. Age, 11-year-old. Number of orgasms, 11. Time involved, 1 hour. Like, examples of multiple orgasm in pre-adolescent males. Some instances of higher frequencies. Like, this is copied straight out of the book. You can go find sexual behavior in the human male. This means it's a footnote citation from the actual book, friends. This is all the real deal here. PDF. Oh boy. Ed.edu. So this is probably some university. Okay, this is how you can probably download it electronically, but probably pay for it. Wait, let's go see here. View. Can we view? No. Online library. Nope. Sometimes you got to do some digging, but eventually you find it. A lot of books people have put, illegally out on the internet. While I did research, I tried to find the books for most of the sources I looked into. My book has over 2,000 citations, friends. I'm not a guy who just throws stuff out there haphazard. I wanted to make sure I was telling the truth so that people could look at that. Anyways, point being, those charts are in the books. You can look at them yourself. We just looked at one of the tables. Table 31. It just goes on and on. It's just so despicable. Now here, guys, is an incredible documentary. We're not going to watch it tonight. It's 2 hours and 44 minutes. It's actually part of like a 2 or 3 part DVD that you can get. But it dives way farther into what was going on, the reality that all of these prison inmates were involved. And oftentimes the prisoners, they would ask, do you know people on the outside we can go research? And the prisoners would say, oh yeah, I'll call my friends and you can go, get information from them. And they probably solicited the information. They probably offered a small fee in exchange for the questionnaires being filled out. But so you would have, and this is all reported on. You can go find this out. You'd have inmates saying, "Go see my friends," and those friends are prostitutes, pimps, various types of hoodlums. Again, people that live a lifestyle that's no very unhealthy, very damaging, not average, atypical, and those were the people they were getting the data from. So when they say, oh yeah, bestiality, people are participating in that fairly regularly. It's because, you have people that are involved in depravity. But yeah, I recommend going and watching this. We might watch this later on in the series because it gets into more of what's now happening. Like, ask yourself, friends, why have the school system teaching kindergarten children about, the birds and the bees and using explicit images and whatnot when parents should be doing that? I can remember learning really disturbing graphic stuff as young as 11, 12 years old. We were able, carte blanche, asking whatever we wanted of our cool, hip teacher who was like 30. And we would ask her about blowjobs and everything. And she wouldn't get too graphic, but she'd explain everything. And we were so excited and it was so funny. And it's no wonder that some of us were involved sexually. It's no wonder that, we were just getting physically involved with each other and everything. And I just, I got to say, let the kids be kids, okay? Let the kids be kids. There's no need to be rushing children into understanding all of this stuff, It's one thing to talk about just the science behind how a baby is made, okay? But I can remember being 13, I think, 12 or 13, watching a film from like a fiber optic camera inside a woman's vagina with a man thrusting until he ejaculated so that we could see what it looked like for sperm to be inside a vagina. Why do you need to know that? well, this is how babies are made, friends. Look at it. Like, just disturbing. How's it going, Sean? Welcome to the stream. Hope you're doing good. Thanks for stopping by. Going down the rabbit hole. But my gosh, like, just disturbing. And I mean, the reality, friends, is you could keep a lot of this stuff really G-rated as you're doing your sex ed up until graduation, you know? And everybody poo-poos on talking to kids about abstinence. Well, it's oftentimes presented in the wrong way. It's not about, don't do this because it's bad, it's dirty, it's filthy. It's just wait because it's special. And you should wait until it's special when you're with the right person in a relationship you know isn't going to dissolve because the person gets bored of you or because their first experience with you wasn't good and you're at a bush party, you know? And then adults, people who are 18, people who have moved out of the house and their parents aren't, you know, the authority over them anymore. If those people want to dive into whatever, reading all kinds of books and watching all kinds of videos and whatnot, by all means, go ahead, you know. But Kinsey's agenda was all about demoralizing society, okay? So two aspects to that. You have the actual morale of society, the spirit of society, diving down where it just is more and more corrupted in terms of just negativity and nastiness. And hands up if you've had your heart broken, you know, hands up if you've broken hearts. We have damaged each other so badly in this last century. And it's just getting faster and faster, you know, where we've turned something incredible and wonderful and special into something that's solely physical and purely casual, when anyone who's honest with themselves for a moment knows that it's not, okay? I know, the girls I've been with know, because I was super, super careful back in my awful days. And I would honestly, you know, being a bar star, I would sabotage myself so often because I'd say, hey, look, I'm not looking for a relationship. And so many girls would walk away. And then I realized, wait a second, these girls, they're actually, a lot of them aren't looking for a relationship, or at least this is what I thought. The truth is everyone's looking for unconditional love. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants a safe, secure relationship that's fun. And so I thought, wait, they're not looking for a relationship, but they want romance. And I found that there was a certain relative truth to this. Let the kids be kids, Rose says, exactly. I found that there was a certain element of truth, okay, relativistic truth, not absolute truth, but women wanted, I don't know. But when I said, yeah, you know, I'm just looking for fun, I started having more success. And I mean, I regret it now. I've repented of that old life, but it became easier. And I also came to understand that, you know, a lot of women were willing to have sex in hopes of getting love. And it didn't matter how honest I was, you know. And I was honest because I didn't want to hurt anybody. My own aunt committed suicide back when I was just a young toddler. And that was so destructive to our family, but it was in part because she got involved in that unfortunate lifestyle, you know. And my own mother being so horrified to find out that I was starting to drink at the age of 16 and sneaking off to parties and stuff because she didn't want anything bad to happen to me. And she also didn't want me to cause anything bad to happen to anybody else, you know. But in my stupidity, in my worldly wisdom, being in my 20s, I thought all this stuff was acceptable. And it was exactly what Kinsey wanted. And so not only do you have the morale of society going down, you also have the morality of society going down. And as we go through this study, friends, we're going to look at communists and their agenda, or Marxist. Marxist coming from Karl Marx, the originator of communism, and their agenda, and the way they skillfully, without firing a shot or dropping a nuclear bomb, were able to just infect the whole entire world, and they did this through psychological, social warfare. And part of their tool set was demoralization of a culture. And this is going to come straight from the mouth of a defecting former KGB agent. So someone who was involved in the Soviet Union's kind of spy, misinformation or disinformation sort of intelligence community. And they didn't just have guys like James Bond. This guy was actually a journalist. So he was taught in how to form propaganda. It's so terrible. But it wasn't just Kinsey's agenda. Let's look up something real quick here. Rockefeller funding, Kinsey Institute. I think this is the one I looked at. I want to find the one I actually looked at today. Yep, this is it. So this is from the Rockefeller Foundation itself, a digital history. And it talks about how, if you don't know who the Rockefellers are, friends, that's okay. Because I had no idea who they were before, about 9 years ago. But they're one of the wealthiest families and most influential families of the world. And they're not good, kind people, friends. And their agenda for the world is, they may say it's for a better, wonderful utopia, a new world order of sorts. But friends, it's not going to be good. So here it says, their first grant to him was $1,600 in 1941. And later on, $40,000. That's a lot of money back then. I guess it looks annually. And they kept giving this up. And then after the first book there, Sexual Behavior of the Human Male, came out, it was a commercial success. But there was some concern about it. So they had to determine whether or not they wanted to distance themselves. Excuse me. I feel sick just reading this. No. They had to determine whether they wanted to distance themselves from the Kinsey Institute. But they decided, look, this is pretty important. Here's a letter from Kinsey himself, apparently. Please don't take away our funding. It's so important. He says here, I found this very interesting. Discontinuation of Rockefeller Foundation support at this juncture of our program will be taken by the population at large as a vote of no confidence in the research. Knowing that the Rockefellers wanted the population at large to be confident in this information, they decided, with much chagrin, I imagine, because of the public attention it was bringing to them, to give him enough funding to finish his next book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, which we just learned involved the awful cataloging of pedophile abuse on young girls. And so after that, boom, funds came to an end in 1954. My theory, friends, and again, I haven't looked into this, but just having the overall picture, understanding what's going on, it just seems obvious to me that they thought, okay, you know what? We've accomplished what we want to do. Let's see where the chips fall. So that brings us to today. I'm from the Republic of Ireland. I have no idea who they are. Yeah, exactly, Rose. Most people don't, but if you look up just Rockefeller, you're going to find out they're so wealthy. I think they made their money in oil back in like the late 1800s. And he was like one of the richest men ever. And he was asked, how much is enough money? And he said, oh, just a little bit more. Like this guy couldn't get enough. But yeah, it's shocking. All right, so here we are in the modern day, friends. This is a film from 2004 with Kevin Bacon. When I watched this, friends, back in my deceived days when I had no idea what was going on and I was going along with the culture and yeah, man, everything's cool, man. I thought this was a really well done movie and I really empathized for Kevin Bacon's character.
Do you have many friends?
No.
How come?
A long time ago, I was
God.
sent away. When I came home, all my friends were gone.
Sounds like you were banished.
So, how are you adjusting?
I'm adjusting okay.
Something happened to you.
Yeah.
I'm not easily shocked. So you're gonna tell me your deep, dark secret?
Look at everybody critically acclaimed. It's
You
so
look
good.
Considering you're an old man now. Living across the street from a grade school. Jeez.
Something wrong with that? Well, the landlord in town will take my money. What can I do for you, Sergeant Lucas?
Yeah, I don't mind if I look around, do you?
I would.
You got something to hide?
Doesn't everybody?
I'd keep away from him if I were you.
Oh yeah, why's that?
I think he's damaged goods. Real damaged.
Walter, what happened to you? What did you do?
What's the worst thing you ever did?
I want you back in your chair now.
Sorry. I don't like nobody behind my back. You think I'm crazy?
Do you think you're crazy?
Talk to me.
Oh, that is sad.
Normal.
It's gonna take time, Walter.
Time.
Sit down.
You can't talk to me like
Like what? You need to make sure that you're being a good boy, Walter. Okay?
Okay.
So what'd he do? Drugs, armed robbery.
Mind your business, Mary Kay. Throw you out that window right now. Think somebody's gonna miss you?
Why do you stay?
I see something in you. Something good. You don't see it yet, but I do.
I don't know why they keep letting freaks like you out on the street. It just means we gotta catch you all over again.
I'm not a monster.
I'm not a monster. Wow, that's like a quote from something else we're going to look at. So, friends, if you didn't catch that, Kevin Bacon plays a pedophile. Stop that, please. A pedophile that went to prison and got out, and now he's, battling those demons, the temptation of falling back into that lifestyle. He's, quote unquote, being rehabilitated. So now he's got a relationship with an actual woman instead of a child. That unfortunate, moment where he says, I don't like anyone behind me. I haven't seen this movie in years. I'm not going to watch it again. I have no interest to, because now I know the propaganda. Okay, I know how Hollywood, as enjoyable as so many movies are, I know it's propaganda, and that makes me not watch a lot of movies. But that was probably a hint that he himself had been abused by a man, and so he didn't like people behind him. Anyways, what happens is he ends up saving some girl from a pedophile because he can see the grooming and what this pedophile is doing to move in on this girl. So he saves the day. Wow, great. That's wonderful. What's the point? Well, it's called normalization. Let's just look up the definition for that. Normalization, Merriam-Webster's probably one of the better dictionaries out there, friends, still. Although dictionaries all the time, friends, they start to change their definitions as there's more political and cultural pressure on them. We don't like what you said. That triggered me. That made me feel bad. That makes people feel, inferior or whatever. Oh, okay, so we can't use those words anymore. And so just like in the George Orwell's book, 1984, if you've never read it, friends, read it or get an audio copy. You gotta listen to it. Maybe one day I'll stream it. I'll read it myself. I don't care about copyright strikes. But they would redefine words. And we see that even today all the time. Definition of normalize: to make, conform to, or reduce to a norm or standard, to make normal, to bring or restore to normal conditions. So normalization, we're more concerned with these two definitions here. They're normalizing pedophilia. Notice he said, I'm no monster. Salon, speaking of the famous magazine, shouldn't have unpublished its article by a pedophile author. A guy named Tom Nickerson had a article put out, Todd Nickerson, called I'm a pedophile but not a monster. I'm attracted to children but unwilling to act on it. Before judging me harshly, would you be willing to listen? So it is sad, friends. He grew up with some sort of a disfiguration, and nobody liked him. I think he was also molested. And so he says the first time he knew he was attracted to younger children was when he saw like a 4-year-old girl and I think, friends, what happened is, as he's thought about it again and again over the decades, he's romanticized that just the innocent noticing as an 11-year-old that, oh, that's a pretty little girl, right? That's normal. You go, oh, she's pretty, haha, good, fine. But as that temptation keeps eating away at some individuals' brains, they go down, down, down into darkness. And then when they look back at certain memories, they reimagine them. And I think that's probably what he did. But yeah, he's to be lauded and applauded because he fantasizes about having sex with children, but he'd never do anything about it. So Salon clearly put that out as a means to normalize pedophilia. And I mean, we're seeing this all over the place. I'm just dropping a couple crumbs here for everybody to see, but they want this to be legal. There's an organization called NAMBLA. NAMBLA was heavily influenced by Kinsey, North American Man-Boy Love Association. There's all kinds of associations like that all over the world. This one has had to go underground because so many FBI and police guys started infiltrating it apparently to catch them, which is awesome. But yeah, friends, I write all about this in my free book. You're welcome to go get it. It is awful. It's horrifying. And the connections, the dots that are connected, friends, by other people than me, like we're talking experts in sociology from all over the place, but I just took the data and put it together. It's horrifying what's going on around us. Here's a fun one. Here's Oprah. Oh, wait. We're going to watch this one because it just looks better. Oprah tries to justify child molestation. So we talked already about fact checker sites and how they're, debunking things all the time and debunking conspiracy theories. No, friends, those sites are all controlled by the same people who have the same agenda, the same bent, the same philosophies, and they do damage control when people are getting too close. We'll let you listen to this yourself. What do you think?
What so many people don't understand. A big part of the confusion and shame for child victims is that the attention and the seduction from the predator, who is probably going to be somebody you know. Right. In order for it to work, it has to be somebody you know.
Yes, let's
somebody
nod.
You admire, somebody you respect, or maybe even love. And it feels good. I mean, if you're 7 years old and somebody, which I was trying to say this to my friends who had children, you're 7 years old and someone is stroking your penis, it feels good.
What was that,
Even
Oprah?
though you don't have a name for what that is, it feels good.
And that was such a particularly challenging part for me in beginning therapy. That was one of the biggest things I kept bringing to therapy was, what does it mean that it felt good? What does that mean about me?
That's one of the reasons it's so confusing for children. Yeah. And when I first said this years ago, people were like, you're crazy, because everybody wants to believe it's like sexual assault and you're being thrown up against the wall and you're being raped. And I have said for years, if the abuser is any good, you won't even know it's happened. You will be in it and you won't.
That sounds just like Clarence Tripp from the Kinsey Institute talking about how skilled Green, aka King, was at his molestation, and how of the hundreds and hundreds of children, only 2 objected to what he was doing. It was because of a fit problem, because he was such a large man.
Won't even know it's happened. And if the abuser is any good, he or she is going to make you feel like you're a part of it. I mean, and nothing is more being a part of it than what we discussed earlier.
Okay, so let's think back to Esther White's testimony. She felt horrible because her father was victimizing her for years. Yeah. This is called normalization. They're trying to make it so it's okay. Pederasty is kind of like the more official term for when older men have relations with younger boys, and it's actually common all over the world. Like, you may not know this, friends, but you can go to like Thailand or Singapore and pay to have sex with children. You just gotta probably ask your taxi driver, like, hey, do you know where I can do this? And some taxi drivers, oh, yeah, sure. I'll show you the area of town. Or maybe they'll say, I don't, man, but I'll take you to a place where you might be able to ask around. You know, you go to like the red light district where there's prostitution in a place like that. You start asking around. They're not going to be like, hey, you're a pervert. You should be having sex with these, you know, women and men of who are adults in our clubs. No, some of them will be like, yeah, I can find that for you for the right amount. And that's not just in Thailand and Singapore. This is all over the world. When we looked at the case in Belgium with Marc Dutroux, the federal authorities, remember this, the federal authorities had a tape of him having sex with an underage girl over in Eastern Europe. He also had footage of him having little children in a gypsy camp exposing themselves to him, and he took pictures of it. And of course, please remember, the federal authorities, the one investigator in charge of that case, hid that video amongst a few others in order to keep the truth from coming out so that this guy could keep molesting and kidnapping girls for the pedophile ring in Belgium. Ugh, that was the first episode, friends. It was awful. But yeah, so U.S. soldiers told to ignore sexual abuse of boys by Afghan allies. Dan Quinn was relieved of his Special Forces command after a fight with a U.S.-backed militia leader who had a boy as a sex slave chained to his bed. This is an awful article. I'm not going to read it for you, friends. But yeah, they were there. So you had Afghani militia leaders. Okay, so if you're not familiar with it, you know, in Afghanistan, you've got Al-Qaeda, which is more of a global Middle Eastern group. They were operating out of Afghanistan to some extent. Then in Afghanistan, you had the Taliban. The Taliban were the guys, the militia that fought against the Russians and kept them out once upon a time. And then, of course, you have smaller pockets of militia all around the country. Which militia was this? I don't know. But this guy was there with his guys, and they were told, look, we got to work with these guys. Just let them do what they're doing. And eventually, I think what happens is him and his buddy beat the crap out of this leader because he's got sex slaves. And these kids aren't like enjoying it. They're being victimized, friends. And so they beat the crap out of him, and they were forced to leave the army. It's just awful. And myself, I'm a veteran. I'm a Canadian. And truth bomb, here we go. I was in 1st Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment. I went over in Apathina 2003 to 2004, I think. And I was in what's called a, what did they call it? Like a cultural awareness briefing. And so picture it, you got like 400 or 500 dudes in their CAD-PAT, just in their CAD-PAT uniforms, sitting in like a gymnasium or some sort of hall like that, and we're all in chairs. It's all very orderly. And then in comes this gentleman who's an Afghani Canadian citizen, I guess, and he was hired as a consultant to help give this briefing. His English wasn't really good, but that's okay. He was very knowledgeable, obviously, because he probably immigrated to Canada, later in life. So he lived in Afghanistan long enough to know exactly what goes on over there. And he said, there's two things you're going to see that are going to make you uncomfortable. And I've been told by your superiors that you just have to look the other way. If you see them, one of those is going to be the physical abuse of women by men, often husbands beating their wives. And I can attest to one situation where we had one of our platoons at a police department, and they were doing observation of the area with their LAV-3, and they were taking turns. I think they had a section of 10 guys there at a time or something. But they could see over the wall of this police department into the next house, like a backyard of another house. And so a woman was out there all the time doing the laundry, hanging the laundry and stuff. And the husband got physical with her. And then he came around and told them, like after them seeing this a couple of times, if you don't move your vehicle so that you can't see my wife, I'm going to have to keep beating her. And he may have even used a harsher punishment than that. I don't remember. But I do remember that this all transpired, at least this transpired. And so they're like, shoot, what do we do? And so, yep, they just moved the vehicle, you know, and that's awful. And the other thing this consultant told us was, you're going to see pederasty. Like, what's that? You're going to see older men with young boys accompany them often, and these boys often have a sexual relationship with these men. And these are going to make you uncomfortable, but you can't do anything about it. You have to understand this is how our culture works. And I don't know if I ever saw that, but there was one time I was working in our camp, Camp Julian, and we were on like security detail, letting workers come into the camp in order to continue building some of the exterior walls out of Hesco Bastion. And so we would pat down every single guy that came in to make sure he wasn't carrying weapons or bombs or whatever. And we would stop every vehicle that had to come in to deliver gravel or whatever. And we would check it for bombs underneath with mirrors and do all that stuff. And yeah, there was like this guy in his mid-late 20s and this boy who was like 10 or 12. And I got the impression it was not bring your kid to work day, because nobody did that. And so, you know, I can't help but wonder and worry if that was going on. Here we go. Pedophilia, a disorder, not a crime. So yeah, again, normalization. You know, they want to decriminalize it. These people are victims, guys. They've got social mental issues that you have to be sympathetic to. And I am sympathetic, friends, but not to the point where you get rid of justice, you know, where the penalty for victimizing a human being, a child, is not prison, but counseling. I'm sorry, friends, is just awful. This is 2014. I wasn't able to find anything. There was recently someone shared a New York Post article saying something about it. Not a disorder, I think, but that's the reality, friends. Like, that's the trajectory. You get enough public opinion to be on your side, and then you say something is okay. And so there's something called I think it's called the MSDMA psychiatric manual. A manual. Nope, that's not what I want. MDMA therapy. Friends, MDMA is not good for your brain or your spirit. Don't do it. There we go, DSM-5, American Psychiatric Association. So the Manual of Mental Disorders, and then it's broken down into the 5th edition or whatever. So what they do is right now, pedophilia is seen as a disorder. And so they keep putting pressure. It's not a disorder, guys. That's so mean, and you're stigmatizing people. You're making it so awful for these poor people. It's an orientation. It's illegal, but it's an orientation. That's what they want us to believe. And I'm going to burst some bubbles again. I don't want to offend anyone. I love everyone, friends. I want everyone to know the truth. Okay, you are well loved by God. No matter what you do in your life, that is not perfect and that is not correct. But back in the 60s and the 70s, the Manual of Mental Disorders said that homosexuality was a mental disorder. And they pushed and pushed. In fact, they got quite violent about it. And they would show up at psychiatric conferences. And it wasn't a peaceful sit-in, friends. They were scary. And they just kept... They just kept intimidating psychiatrists, saying, it's not a disorder, say it's an orientation. So finally they relented and they removed it. Okay. And then so, you know, here we are today, and it's a commonplace thing. Okay, fine. You want to do that? Great. You're an adult. What you do in your bedroom, it's not my business. I'm not like, even the fact that there were sodomy laws still, I don't think that's something that you should legislate. Personally. But when it comes to underage children, saying something is not a disorder and that it's an orientation. And friends, we are moving so fast now. I would not doubt if in 15 to 20 years, your children are going to be allowed to say that they want a relationship with an adult. That's how fast we're moving. That's how fast the culture's moving. That's everything I got, friends. That's everything for tonight. Wait, I have a couple comments here. Movie. Oh, right. Yeah, we talked about that. Animal contact was taboo. Remember when Gebhard said that? Oh gosh. You can look in my book. I talk all about sexual immorality and the danger of it, and I talk about the reality that there are heavy petting zoos essentially in Germany. Like, awful. Tripp says children thought was well liked because no. Oh yeah. The idea that Clarence Tripp was saying that obviously all these kids liked what they were being involved in because there was only ever 2 complaints. Baloney. And the fact that he was also having sex with the mothers, I bet what was happening was he was going around town to town during his surveying, and he would seduce or whatever a mother who he saw had children, give them a good time and deceive them into believing it was okay and appropriate to take care of their kids too. And some women, sadly, you want to believe every woman's going to be a mama bear and protect her kids and her cubs. That's not always the case. In fact, here's another truth bomb. Oh, thanks for another 4,000 points, Rose. I don't know what those do for me, but yeah. Another truth bomb from the Army. And this is not a commentary on the Army. The Army has a lot of wonderful guys in it. Patriotic guys who love you, love their country, would be willing to die for you. Yes, sadly, morality in the Army is very skewed. You're very welcome, Rose. And, stay tuned. We're going to talk about some more stuff. But, yeah, the world is not what you think it is. And there is a very real, invisible realm all around our physical realm. And that's where the agenda is coming from. But through human agents. But anyway, so there's a lot of dudes in the Army, you're trying to one-up each other. Who's the alpha male here? I'm the alpha male. Watch me. I'm going to have sex with as many women as I can, And it was so sad. Like, that's a lie, friends. The number of notches on your belt as a guy says nothing about your masculinity. In fact, it says a lot about your lack of self-esteem. And I'm not trying to hurt feelings here. I'm telling the truth. This is where I came from. And your insecurity and your desire to try and prove your worth and prove that you're worth something. When I found out how much I was really worth, friends, never again was I like, gotta go pursue somebody and try and, get a notch on the belt. That all left me completely. It's such an incredible change of mind and heart. It's supernatural. But yeah, it takes a stronger man, it takes a stronger man to conquer and control his sexual, his sexual appetite. Okay? It's nothing to give in to yourself and constantly do whatever with no self-control. It is hard to be like, you know what? Women are valuable. They're precious. And I'm going to wait and I'm going to treat them and honor them as such. That is a real man. So sadly, a lot of dudes in the Army, who's the toughest, who's the baddest, who can get the most girls. And at the same time, don't think too little of them because of that. Like, obviously that's something that needs to be corrected, but it's not going to come from legislation and people hitting them over the head with a social justice warrior, endeavor or marches or whatever. No, it's got to be changes of the heart and mind through good, honest communications and hopefully a supernatural change. These are the same guys and even women that are willing to lay their lives down for you. And man, a lot of the stuff in the Army I didn't like because it was just a lot of waiting around and training for what seemed like nothing because of the time I was in. But, nevertheless, I have a lot of fond memories because just you sweat and you bled with guys that you knew would die for you, and guys that were courageous. And, friends, people make light of our Canadian military because it's small, but there are some wonderful people and just awesome dudes in it. I wish they thought the same way I do spiritually, and I can only pray for them. But awesome dudes. So please don't think little of them because of what I'm about to say to you. But I can remember one story from one sergeant about a guy. It was when I was in battle school training to be infantry. And he told us a story about this really crazy, hardcore, evil dude back at battalion or whatever. And when that guy went on his R&R, his rest and relaxation, instead of going back to Canada from, I think they were probably in Sarajevo or Croatia, Bosnia, something like that during that peacekeeping time, he decided to go to Thailand. He rented himself a family. The father ironed his clothes so that he could go out at night or do whatever he wanted. The son went and got him his paper and whatever else he needed. And he had sex with the teenage daughter. I think she was an older teenage daughter, but still underage, and the mother. That's what he did for however long he did that. That was the story this guy told us. This sergeant told us about this crazy dude, and that's awful to me. That is so evil. But you go to a place where that's the culture and is acceptable. When in Rome, right? And if you don't have moral absolutes, then you'll do anything if you don't have convictions. And then there was this other horrible story. A guy I went through basic training and battle school with. His name's Casey Ledwin. I'll say that. You can go look him up. Ledwon. Very manipulative, very sociopathic. He tried to convince me that I was gay when I was barely 20 going through the military. Made fun of me because I hadn't had sex yet. So, again, you're with all these alpha guys who want to be alpha males. You're a virgin. You're 20-year-old virgin because you thought you should save it for marriage because you thought that'd be special. And all these guys are putting pressure on you. What do you think I did? I had no fortitude. I had no integrity. I had no inner strength. I had so little character. I just went out and started doing the things that they said were cool and would make me a man. And to get this guy to leave me alone, how sad. But this guy, we found out later on, and I remember meeting his wife. He would boast about how gorgeous his wife was. Yeah, she's a model from Toronto. He took this woman, when I finally saw her like years later, broke her into like a shell of a human being. It was sad meeting her and meeting his little kids. They're like 4 and 5 or whatever. And then rumors started going around that he was being investigated. They'd found child pornography on his computers, and he was all into computers, sold all this stuff. In fact, I had gone to the house to buy a portable DVD writer because back then that was like all the rage, people burning their own movies on DVD. And that's when I met his wife. I didn't meet her at our graduation because I didn't really hang out with this guy, so I didn't go say hi to his family. She divorced him and left him. And he said, she's just making it all up. But no, he'd been molesting his own kids and making videos, taking pictures. And then while he was still out on bail as the court proceedings were going on and stuff, he was dating online, meeting women, looking for the ones that were susceptible, vulnerable, seducing them, and finding the ones that would be okay with him victimizing their children. And so that's what he did. He looked for single mothers, and then he got caught for that. I think he went to prison. In Canada, he probably got 5 years, good behavior, 3 years. He's out, probably. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I don't want to. But some of the vets that I remember that I keep in touch with over Facebook told me about this, and I was not surprised. He was such a horrible human being, but sad. Like he probably himself had a horrible upbringing and everything, but man, you don't do that. You can't do that to people. So I bring that up because we're talking about this surveyor Green who going around, how was he able to molest all these kids? Well, who knows? Maybe the mothers permitted it. Oh, right. You know, they kept saying that they needed the pedophile data. They needed the pedophile data. Friends, we've already talked about them. They had all of these prisoners that they were questioning and surveying. Many of them were pedophiles and deviants. It wasn't that enough information? No, it wasn't. You had to correspond with pedophiles, not even supposedly past pedophiles who had stopped because they buried their diaries in the desert, but like international clubs where these guys were communicating with each other and then found out about Kinsey and were sending in their questionnaires while they timed raping their kids. Just despicable. So why would you for a moment doubt that Green or anyone else was in touch with him, knowing that this was going on and he was permitting it? He should have reported these people, but he didn't because he was himself as a deviant. And if you keep looking and digging, you do see it's possible that he himself engaged in child prostitution when he was in Italy on a trip. But I won't say that's a fact, because you got to look for yourself, and it's quite possible it's not true. But he definitely commented on how interesting he found it that there were Italian families in some of the rural areas of Italy willing to rent out their children. Despicable. We won't talk about it too much here, but there's a guy named Aleister Crowley. I just want to show you a picture of this person. Oh boy. Now, friends, I don't know how far you've gone down the rabbit hole, but maybe you've seen triangles around recently, specifically with eyes in the middle. This guy is essentially dubbed the father of modern Satanism. He has been influential on most of the celebrities, pop stars, musicians that you love and adore, as well as elite people, entrepreneurs, businessmen, politicians, powerful people. He wrote many, many books, and many people read them. And when you read their autobiographies or biographies or memoirs, they refer to this person. So Kinsey was also influenced by him. He was fascinated by him. He really enjoyed one of his poems or books called White Stains. And it's possible that they also corresponded. Awful. But we'll be looking more at him as we progress along in our journey here. Yeah, again, about Green, Green wasn't still molesting, but they were already getting data from other current child pedophiles. So again, there's no reason for anyone to jump to the defense of Kinsey or excuse their own appreciation of what Kinsey has done by trying to excuse that if we already know he was still in touch with all these other people, right? And I hope, friends, you're seeing this and you're really starting to question what's going on around you. Why are we bombarding our children with sex education when they're really young? Why are we getting so graphic as we go on, enticing kids to run home and get on the internet and look up this stuff? People think it'd be so harmful if children didn't know about this, because then they're teenagers and they're having sex and not knowing what they're doing and they're getting pregnant or whatever. I think there'd be a lot less sex if kids weren't inundated by it and all the movies that they watch in their classrooms. And but I think we're way past that now. I mean, now families, parents have to, in love, with great discernment, be educating their children, because they're going to see it at school. I saw my first pornographic magazine when I was 7 years old. I was at a babysitter's house looking for toilet paper under the sink, and I found her, my babysitter was like a 16-year-old girl. I found her 18-year-old brother's stash, and I looked at it, and it was shocking. It was freaky, but it was alluring, and it was, that's really unfortunate. And thankfully I put it away and I didn't think about it again for years. But no 7-year-old kid should see that crap. But anyways, that stuff's all around us. So we have to educate our kids. I just don't think it should be done the way it is from our school systems. And the reality is our governments want to believe that parents can't parent well enough, so governments need to be parents. And that's like a half-truth. So for one, it's not true, okay? Governments will never be the best parents. Teachers cannot be the parents of our kids. But it is true that parents aren't parenting. What percentage of kids nowadays are being born by accident? Or it's just like, shoot, man, I knocked up that girl that I've been dating for the last 6 months, but what the hey, let's have a kid. And rather than stepping up to the plate and being like, okay, you know what, we're having a baby. Let's figure this out. Let's read books about it. Let's get educated. It's like, let's wing it. And, you're not raising the kid. You're shoving it in front of TV. As soon as it's old enough to hold anything up, you got an iPad in its hands so that it's entertained, so that we can keep doing what we want to do. Vlogging, reading magazines, talking on the phone with friends, or going and playing video games, going and visiting our buddies, and not being fathers and not being mothers. And so, yes, it's true that a lot of parents sadly aren't parenting these days. And we've gone so far away from truth and the wisdom in order to parent properly, which is just so tragic to me. And it's one of the things I hope that this series can help people be encouraged to figure out as we move along in this series. But so governments have taken over that role, and that's not how kids need to be learning about sex. And so I hope everyone's realizing what Kinsey did was super damaging. There were things that people in the 40s and 50s didn't even think about doing and consider about doing with their wives and husbands until the book came out and everyone said, this is fine, this is acceptable. And then you had the sexual revolution of the 60s. And friends, that wasn't good for us. That was so bad. And we don't even know how to have relationships anymore because of all of this fallout. Like, it's such a mess. There's so much heartache. There's so much heartbreak. I'm 38 years old. Now, granted, my life changed drastically 9 years ago. And so I have given myself over to, I'll just say, a higher purpose. And writing this book, this free ebook, was a big part of that. And so I haven't really, I've not really looked around for a relationship, because until my book's done, I don't want to busy myself with something that is so huge and awesome and amazing, but that takes so much time. And so I got to get the book done. But up until I was 30, I was running around being a bachelor thinking, well, maybe I'll settle down with the right girl. And around the age of 29, I started my heart was hurting so bad. It was so broken. It didn't matter who it was with, what they looked like, how good my experience was. I felt so dead inside. And, and I started saying, I just want to meet someone who I can love and have a family with. That's something that people should be doing when they're 20, 21, 22, young, that have energy. And nowadays we're all being brainwashed into believing and being conditioned, and it's being normalized. No, wait until you've, got your degrees, you're established in your careers, you're making $100,000 a year so that you can have a house, and you look lonely. Oh, thanks, man. No, I'm not lonely, not at all. I'm alone right now as I talk to people, but I'm definitely not lonely. I have a lot of awesome friends. I have an awesome family, and I've got a God who loves me, so not lonely. Streaming for one viewer when you could be having kids or taking care of them. Ugh. Okay, so the troll's here. Thanks. Oh my gosh, what a sad person. Dude, you're the one who needs the truth. You should go back and watch my past streams talking about going down the rabbit hole. But yeah, super unfortunate. So we got people who are waiting until they're in their 30s to have kids. And friends, it is hard running around after Rugrats. It takes so much energy, and going and building tree forts with your kids or whatever, or wrestling. When you get older and older and older and your joints don't heal very well and your back hurts and everything, you can get hurt playing with your kids, and think about when they're 10 and you're now 50. Like, how hard is it then to keep up after them? Dad, want to go for a bike ride? I'll try, and I'm saying this from my perspective here, friends. I'm going to be in that boat, and it's like, okay, I got to make sure I take care of myself and I'm healthy so I can keep up. And the other sad reality is, I don't want to hurt feelings here, but it's going to burst some bubbles. Like, women can only have healthy children up until a certain age in their life. And we're finding a lot of women now are really regretting that they spent their 20s living it up at nightclubs because they wanted the attention of various men. And now I've seen it. I've gone on dating profiles or dating sites. And now they're like looking for somebody because they want a family. And it's like, hopefully it's not too late, And so we have really damaged our culture. We got to step it back. We got to go back. Give me the fast version. No, dude, you can go back and you can watch the last hour and a half, and you can go watch the last streams I've done. So take care, and that's enough. But it is pretty much the end of this stream tonight, friends. Dropping truth bombs in the battle of the mind. Yeah, this is all we are going to talk about in regards to pedophilia. I mean, it's going to come up again because it's so ingrained in what's going on with the elite and the agenda. But we're going to switch it up. We're going to start looking at other things. We're going to look at things like the reality that mainstream media, friends, is lying to us. We touched on that very briefly about how all of the different outlets are kind of owned by conglomerates. And so, like, very few people actually own and control all of the editors for all of these other news outlets. So these few people get together and say, what do we want the narrative to be? And they say, it should be this. Fair enough. And then they tell their people, here's the direction we're going to go in. And we're going to be looking at, what else? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Stay tuned. But I'm going to close for now. And I'm going to do something called praying before we go, guys, because the reality is we need God's help. He's the only one that can help us in this situation. And he is the one that changed my mind, my heart, and my spirit 9 years ago when I gave my life over to him and I trusted in him for my salvation. And he caused me to turn away from my old life of sin and to see that his life was going to be better for me. A life of getting to know him who's infinite and who is love and who is unconditionally loving. He was what I was looking for. And it was so sad that I waited so long, denying him as he tried to pursue me. I hope you find him, friends. Go to my website, hehasanswers.com. Where are we here? There we go. Hehasanswers.com. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this night. Thank you, God, for saving me and saving some of the people who have viewed this. I know Trevor, who was in here earlier, is saved. And God, we need your help so bad. There's so much evil afoot, and I know it breaks your heart. It grieves you, but it also enrages you. You are angry at the way things are going. You have said in your word that anyone who causes a little one to sin, it is better for that person that they would have a millstone, a giant piece of stone, tied around their neck as they were dropped into the abyss. That would be better than the penalty, the punishment that awaits them because of what they've done to little ones and in causing them to sin. And not just in that kind of abuse, but in misleading them to do anything that you don't like. And so I thank you so much that you're gracious, that even though you're holy and you're awesome and you're perfect, and you cannot be around us sinners, you love us so much that you sent your son. He died for us. He paid the penalty. He took our sin upon himself on the cross. He bore the punishment that we deserve, and he paid the penalty for us. And he rose again to show that he had indeed conquered death and the penalty of sin so that we could have eternal life. If only we would turn to him and believe in him. And so I thank you so much for that, Lord. I pray that you'll continue doing that for people who are viewing this. And I pray that you'd open people's eyes and help them see what's going on around us, Lord. And we know that you're returning. the world as we see it is not the one that we are supposed to be in for the rest of eternity. You're going to come and you're going to make all things right, and you're going to establish a new heaven and a new earth, and you're going to rule over everything in a way that's just and benevolent and awesome. And I pray for all the victims that were involved in Kinsey's research, Lord, and I pray for those who partook in it. God, help them to know you. Help them to know that they can turn from sin and be made new, be washed clean. I thank you so much, Lord, that you made me new when I also was a sinner in the way I lived my life. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you, everybody, and have a good night.